to the next episode of Just Advisor Things. Today we have Samantha Wheeler from Indian Ridge Middle School in Florida. We have met several times at different workshops, and so we are so excited to chat with you today. We want to talk about specifically a middle school program. I have a lot of advisors that reach out wanting more middle school resources, so I'm so excited to have Samantha join us today and just share how she does stuff, because her kids have the most fun creating their yearbooks. Their yearbooks look great. They win awards with them, and they have a lot of fun in the process. So thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing, Samantha?
I'm awesome. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to chat with you. To get started, usually I just like to introduce you. So tell us about how
Yeah,
you got into teaching, how you got into advising, and we know you're middle school, but like tell us a little bit about your program.
sure. So, this is my 15th year teaching. I've been teaching mostly middle school. I initially thought I wanted to teach elementary school. I was going to be a kindergarten teacher because when you have curls like this is people assume, and
Makes
that's what
sense.
everyone told me. They were like, "I don't understand why you're not an elementary school teacher," because I was working in a bank. And so I decided I need to just do it. I need to bite the bullet and go back to school. So I went back and got my master's degree in elementary education, did my student teaching and did student teaching in third grade and was anxious the entire time. And
It takes
I
a
was like,
special breed to teach elementary. I don't
you
know.
know, and I was like, there's a lot of snot and there's a lot of tying shoes. And I didn't have any of my own children yet. And I was like, I don't know if I could do this. So I ended up taking a long-term sub position as a sixth grade math teacher and was like, oh, breath of fresh air. This is what I should be doing with my life. Middle school is where I can make the difference. I wasn't going to be able to make it in elementary.
Right.
So I so I started teaching middle school and have never looked back. And language arts has always been my passion. It was my favorite class, all through my own schooling. Writing has been my passion. And so I decided to teach middle school language arts. When I moved to Indian Ridge Middle School, they had a yearbook position open. So I'd be teaching 4 classes of language arts and then 1 class of yearbook. And I was like, sure, we'll give it
So
a
hard could
shot.
it be?
How could it be? I never did yearbook in high school. Like I never was on a yearbook staff. But my bachelor's degree is in communication studies. I thought I was going to be the next Katie Couric on the Today Show when I was in
Don't we
college.
all?
I was sure of it. And then I took my first journalism class in college and I had to write my own obituary. And I was like, yeah, I can't do this. I can't, maybe journalism isn't for me. So I had a background in journalism. I worked in a newspaper setting all through high school, but I never did yearbook. So once I got into the middle school setting and I was teaching the yearbook class, I kind of realized that there was a huge lack of, they didn't know how to interview, they didn't know how to quote, they didn't know how to structure, a copy or an article the way that it needed to be done. And so in my overambition that I tend to be, I decided that I was going to start a journalism class as a prerequisite for my yearbook class. So it was originally a 7-8 combo yearbook class. And I was losing the 7th graders going into 8th grade because it wasn't a high school credit. And they wanted to take the 8th grade classes that were high school credit electives.
Right.
So I changed it to be only an 8th grade elective for yearbook and made it a high school credit class. So we lined it up to the course codes for our local high school. And then I created a 7th grade journalism class that was a prerequisite for yearbook. So if you wanted to ever take yearbook, you had to take journalism first.
Right.
And
That's great.
and so I got really lucky that Balfour, which is the company we use, they let us use the same platform to create the newspaper that we were using to create the yearbook. So they were learning how to do everything at that time we were using StudioWorks. They learned how to use StudioWorks. They learned how to interview. They learned how to write an article. They learned how to take good pictures and write captions and quote and all those things. So they learned how to do all the things that they needed to do, like quote, like interview, take good pictures, write good captions, write an article that was meaningful, use literary devices and headlines, all of that. Plus they learned how to use the program. So going into yearbook as 8th graders, they already had this foundation of knowledge and it made the yearbook process so much smoother.
Oh, I
It
bet,
wasn't
because you're
having
not rushing to teach everything right in the beginning of the year.
exactly. So because I had them for a full year in seventh grade, and most of those seventh graders took journalism, not necessarily for the idea of being in journalism, but because they had me in sixth grade and they just wanted to hang out with me more.
Right.
I had developed these relationships with these kids, and so I ended up having kids 3 years in a row. And so that was really the benefit of it. When you develop those relationships with these kids, they want to work hard for you. And so not only did I have this wonderful prerequisite journalism class where we were creating the school newspaper, they were learning all the foundation knowledge, including the computer base
Mhm.
of what they would have to do every day, but also, getting them into yearbook, they already wanted to work hard for me.
Right.
They didn't want to disappoint me. They wanted to put their best foot forward and make something wonderful because they wanted to do that with me.
Right.
So it's a very Montessori philosophy when you have, kids over multiple years
Mhm.
and they really teach each other and you become not a teacher but a facilitator.
Right.
And that was really my goal in creating this kind of cohesive 3-year program.
That's so great, especially we don't see that a lot at middle school,
No.
so can you talk a little bit about how you did that? Because I don't know if it's, certain districts are stricter about
Yeah.
course codes and stuff like that. Like, how did you navigate dealing with the administrative side of getting that to happen? Because I think a lot of
Yeah.
advisors would love it, but they
Yeah.
feel like they can't do that.
So I'm very persuasive.
I
I
love
mean,
it.
honestly, I went into my principal's office and I was like, here's what I want to do. Here's why I want to do it. I have the degree in communications. I have the work experience because I had done a newspaper
Mhm.
all through high school on a national level. Um, I am qualified to create this journalism class, and we have almost no seventh grade electives.
Mm.
And so it was, there was a need for it, not only at to help the yearbook program, but at our school level, there was a need to have more electives for the kids to choose from, and specifically in our district, more academic electives.
Mhm.
To have an art class or to have a music class or a drama class, that they're not viewed as academic electives. But when you can approach your administration and say, I want to teach an academic elective, their ears are going to open in a different way.
Right. That's
So
a great point.
I think there has been in Florida specifically a larger push for more elective classes, more enrichment classes, and you're hitting these kids that are labeled gifted,
Mhm.
and they want to start their high school career in seventh grade,
Mhm.
because they're already thinking ahead that far. When I'm pulling in those kids, the parents are happy, the administration is happy,
For
the kids are
sure.
happy. So, I was really lucky that the course code so yearbook that first year that I moved it to a high school credit, it was journalism one.
At the
And then
high
I
school, like.
correct. So it
Mhm.
lined up with the journalism one class at our local high school. And then after I did the journalism class, so the seventh grade class for a full year, I pushed to make that journalism one. So
Okay.
then so then my yearbook, my eighth grade yearbook class actually became journalism two.
Oh, okay.
So in seventh grade, they were taking a ninth grade class, and in eighth grade, they
Right.
were taking a 10th grade class. And so technically, if they took journalism and yearbook with me at Indian Ridge, they were actually fulfilling all of their high school requirements for fine arts before they even graduated middle school.
Wow, that's incredible. Like, that's such a good
So
trajectory.
So if you can go to the principal and have that research and say, this is what I'm thinking and this is how it can benefit the kids, then I think that it's hard for them to say no.
Right.
You're not going and saying, I just want to start a class all about Disney. Like you're going with truly something that is beneficial for the kids in the long run.
Right, for sure. So when
Hmm.
those kids get into high school, I'm sure a lot of them do want to go into yearbook. What happens with their credits then? Because they've already taken prereqs. Like, are they able to go
Yeah.
straight into yearbook, or do they have to go through a path as well?
So I actually, surprisingly, I don't have a lot of kids that continue into high school because they do already have the journalism one and two credits. But I've been working really closely with
Mm.
the person that does the yearbook at the high school. through the FSPA program
Hmm.
because they're now my district coordinator, and we're working a lot more closely so that we have a couple of kids that were my editors last year that are now taking journalism 3 in freshman year so that they can continue in,
Right.
that line. But because they do want to make a career out of journalism, they didn't want to wait because I think um, they kind of felt like they didn't want to wait till junior year because once journalism 1 is technically a freshman class, journalism 2 is a sophomore class.
Right.
So if they wanted to continue with it, they thought they had to wait until junior year when they could take journalism 3.
Right. Right.
But the 2 girls that are now taking it freshman year didn't want to wait. So they went to the guidance counselor and they were like, we don't want to do that. Here's what we want to do instead. And they were like, all right, well, let's look
Yeah.
into it. Let's figure it out. And so they called me, we had conversations, and they were able to get the schedule change into that class. And now they're going to Boston for, NEA and like all these different things. And I'm like, this is why I do it, because
Yes,
these
absolutely.
so there's a couple of these kids where I'm like, I'm going to see you. You're going to be the next Katie Couric. It wasn't going to be me. It's going
Exactly.
to be you, and that's okay.
Well, even if they don't go into journalism, I mean, there's so many adjacent fields, marketing, sales,
Yeah, absolutely.
technology. I just spoke with another interview. I think it went live 2 weeks ago. That like there's so many jobs outside of a journalism classroom that are applicable that a lot of students don't even
Yeah,
think about. They just think journalism. And so
right.
that's so good that you're preparing them for this really 6 year trajectory if they, stay throughout high school.
Yeah.
Is there a max? Like, so like in Texas, we have like yearbook 1, 2, and 3 because it's
Hmm.
journalism 1, and then ideally yearbook 3 would be their senior year. Is
Yeah.
there a room for them to continue to take it all 4 years of high school?
They could take it all 4 years of high school. They just stop getting the credits for it. So
Okay.
it just becomes a choice that they're making.
Mm-hmm.
So especially if they want to be like editor in chief,
Mm-hmm.
their senior year of high school, they have to kind of go in knowing that they're not going to get the credit for that class. But the benefit of having taken the credits in middle school is that they don't need those credits.
Right. And
They've
they're
already
so
fulfilled
ahead.
them. Yeah, they're ahead of the game. So having a class that they're doing just for them, just for fun, their junior or senior year, that's
Right.
okay too, and I think there's a unfortunate pathway that's going on with teenagers with this generation specifically, that they have to always be doing something every single second of the day that will benefit their future. And
Mm-hmm.
they've kind of forgotten about like, but it's okay to just be a teenager
You can just
too.
have fun
You can
sometimes.
just have
Yeah.
fun. If you just want to do yearbook because you just love doing yearbook, then do it. That's okay too.
Right.
So I love that hopefully some of these kids are now going to get to do that now that I'm working more closely with the high school
I
advisor.
love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so with middle school, one of the biggest questions that I get is I talk a lot about empowering your students to make it a student publication, have them be doing
Mhm.
it, make those decisions, delegate, delegate, delegate. But with middle school, it's like I don't trust these kids because babies. So how do you structure like the balance of being the teacher, the advisor, the coach, the facilitator, and letting it be a student publication and that kind of stuff?
So what I tell them when they start in my journalism class in 7th grade, and again, I've had a lot of them in 6th grade already, so the relationship is already there, is last year I was your teacher. This year I'm your coworker.
That's cool.
This is a working newsroom. I'm the person that everything has to go through my desk last. But everybody's up, everybody's moving, everybody's having conversations. We're all helping each other out. I trust you to go out and do the interviews with a pass in your hand and come back and do what needs to be done. And we have, a rough draft deadline. We have a final draft deadline where I've gone through and made edits for them. I try to be flexible, as far as like, okay, it's a middle school. They're not going, this isn't New York Times. I would
Hmm.
love for it to be the New York Times, but it's not. It's a middle school publication.
Hmm.
So I try to be more understanding of like, it's not going to necessarily be hard hitting news. We produce an 18 to 20 page newspaper monthly. So,
That's really impressive, especially for middle school. Yeah.
I mean, we manage it and I have it kind of structured by sections. So we have like the headline news spread, we have a sports spread, we have a clubs and events spread, we have an editorial spread, we have like a what's trending spread. So they can talk about like movies or books or, necklaces that are coming
Whatever it
out, or
is. Yeah.
whatever it might be, you know. And then we have like an upcoming event spread where they actually go through and put like whatever, anything that's happening over the next month. We do business ads in our newspaper as well, so we can make some money for the newspaper.
Hmm.
You know, so we have a like a jaguar on the spot because our mascot is a jaguar.
Hmm.
So they go in, they ask like just a single question to a bunch of different kids, like, you know, two or three seventh graders, two or three eighth graders, two or three sixth graders, and then they ask a couple of you know, the staff members as
Hmm.
well. And it's just like a one question thing, but they get an answer and then they just kind of can quote them on the side.
Right.
Um, so, you know, we do lots of different things. At the beginning of the month, we go through a brainstorming session. And I actually learned that from when I worked at the national publication that it was through Rutgers University that I did this because I grew up in New Jersey. But we would once a month we would meet and we would have a brainstorming session and we would talk about what's cool, what do we need to talk about, what's going on in the world, what's going on in your lives as a teenager, what
Right.
needs to be discussed, what did kids your age want to hear, what do they want to know about,
Yeah.
what do they want to read. And so we make a list on the board and then we kind of pick who's going to do which one, depending on like, oh, you're a soccer player and there's, you know, the soccer district champs are coming up. Let's make sure you're kind of covering that because you have some inside knowledge on it. So depending on what they're personally connected to or have, you know, an investment in, maybe they're best friends on the soccer team, but they're
Right.
not,
They're
they're
already
going to
with that
go.
group of kids. Yeah.
Right. So then, you know, we'd kind of I let them choose kind of what they want to be writing about. So they are personally invested in it at that point. Um, and it has to be approved through administration. So after we've done the final edit, I send it to administration, they approve it. I've only had a couple of issues with things that they were like, we're not touching that. This is not, I feel like we're going to get pushback from parents, or, you know,
Hmm.
this is specifically political, or this is
Hmm.
specifically religious. Like, we just can't, you know, go over that. And I have a whole lesson at the beginning of the year, and we talk about Hazelwood versus Kohlmeyer. And
Hmm.
the discussion is our principal has the final say. If they
Right.
tell us to pull it, we pull it. Like, they know, you know, so when they're making these decisions about what they want to write about, I let them have the freedom to choose, but they also know there are some limitations because
Right.
they are
Right.
in middle school. This isn't the New York Times, you
Exactly.
know?
Yeah. And
So,
it's a learning environment. Like let's take baby steps here. So
yeah, yeah, exactly. So,
gotcha. Okay. And then what about yearbook when they step into year two?
yeah, so yearbook. So typically at the end of the journalism year, so the end of their seventh grade year, usually May, we do the theme project for what would be yearbook. I know a lot of yearbook classes do it at the beginning of the school year.
Hmm.
I do it at the end of the year before so
Hmm.
that
I like
we
that
can,
because then you go into the summer knowing.
and I want to go to the conference
Hmm.
in the summer already with a plan in place. So I usually choose my editors for yearbook in March or April because they have course cards that they have to fill out, and you know,
Hmm.
it's a whole thing. And then I make every student, whether they're going into yearbook or not, because some kids do journalism and they're like, I don't, maybe this isn't for me. I'm like,
Right.
okay, that's fine. I only want you there if you want to be there, you know?
Hmm.
So I usually keep most of them, but you know, I make everybody do the theme project. I give them examples. I let them choose kind of what they think would be fun. They go through magazines. They pull out, you know, pages from magazines where they're like, oh, this font is cool, or this layout is really fun, or we should do a quiz like this. They have to create a 20-page binder
Hmm.
of a theme. They have to create a cover. They have to create a sample spread of what it would look like. So they start with the yearbook frame of mind at the end of journalism.
Hmm.
And then they're already excited about it. So we go to the summer conference. I bring editors only. It's
Hmm.
usually 5. We figure out the cover, we get everything situated. It's like 3 12-hour days of like I'm sitting on the floor with
Hmm.
Starbucks just hoping for the best.
Yeah.
But I bond with these editors in
Hmm.
such a special way. So when we get to school in August, the editors are completely invested. They've already told all their friends in the class about it. They're really excited. And then we can just jump right in. They already know how to use the computer program because they
Right.
use it in journalism. So now I'm teaching them delicious design.
Hmm.
And we're starting that stuff in August, September. We're talking about the theme. We're talking about what our voice is going to be. And then we can start covering things. We can start divvying out pages. We can start assigning spreads and figuring out what the quizzes and the special pages are going to be. So we hit the ground running in August with yearbook because most of their knowledge that they need is already there from journalism.
Right.
There's things I do have to cover. Like we have to go more in depth with certain things. Our newspaper layout is nothing like our yearbook layout.
Right. Right.
It's a different animal. It's a different type of publication. So we do have to talk about, this is what we did last year, but this is what we're doing this year. And so I go through PowerPoints. I do teach lessons. There's a lot more vocabulary that they have to learn because in journalism, we don't really talk about pikas. That's not,
and there's
that's
no
not
like
something,
eye line, like there's very specific
right,
yearbook terms that are different. Yeah.
right. So there is some learning and some knowledge that they have to get at the beginning of the school year with yearbook, but for the most part, we're hitting the ground running and
Yeah.
we're, fully committing to the theme. Like I decorate my entire yearbook side of the classroom in whatever the theme might be.
Mm-hmm.
And they usually come to school on the first day and they have like, for example, this year, our yearbook theme is moon phases, like teenagers go through phases. So they all have galaxy
Cute
stress balls. So they all had galaxy stress balls, and I got them like the water bottle stickers that are all moons and planets and stars, and I did a whole bulletin board full of space things. And so they kind of walked in already like, oh my gosh, this is what we're doing.
Right.
So I even bought a puzzle, like a 1,000-piece puzzle, and it was like cats in space.
That's so
and
funny.
it was like, some
Yeah.
days you're stressed and some days you just can't. And that's okay. Do a fun space puzzle.
Yeah.
So they have like I need a chill break corner to do that kind of stuff because they are still only 13, 14 years old.
Right.
They're not high school students working on a yearbook, even though it's a 10th grade level class. I have to respect the fact that they're really still 13 and 14-year-olds.
Right. And even for high school, like that kind of stuff is so helpful, especially during deadlines. Like I always try and tell advisors, like if you're feeling stressed, your kids are also feeling stressed.
For sure.
They have 7 other classes or whatever, and so that implementing those things on purpose is so helpful.
Yeah. And I think something that translates from middle school to high school is food is always good.
Right.
Anytime you can incorporate food into anything in a classroom, you're winning. So like I said, we're doing moon phases. So we did like the Oreos where you carve the icing to make it look like a moon phase.
Yeah.
And it's like it's like a 6th grade science experiment activity. And I was like, I don't care. We're going to do it in 8th grade yearbook. It's fine.
I had my students making slime and they were learning communication. Like there's a way to make it educational or just make something fun. Like it's totally fun. So I love that. I mean, it really sounds like you have modeled your program, not just after high school and what works, but like a professional newsroom and like the hierarchy of moving up to the next publication level and that kind of thing. I think that's so important to kind of show them also like these are skills that you'll need in the workforce. So has it been an evolution that you've kind of implemented over time and made little tweaks along the way, or are there things that you've tried in the past that haven't worked out, to a new advisor that's kind of looking for a system that works for them? How did you come up with all of this?
So I actually am a Montessori trained teacher. So that Montessori background, when I moved over to this school, and it was a traditional school where they had 6 periods a day and they were 55 minutes each, and most teachers only teach 1 grade level. I was like, okay, how do I make this work for me? Because I worked at a school for 6 years where I had kids for multiple years and I only had 44 kids in a day. I saw 22 for half and 22 for the other half. And my relationship with those kids was lifelong, and I was like, how do I move that into this kind of traditional environment so that I can still have those relationships? Because as a teacher, that is the single most important thing to me. If I don't have a relationship with these kids, if they don't respect me because of a human level, if I don't respect them at a human level, then what I teach them is irrelevant. And so I had to find a way to create this 3-year relationship with the kids. And when I saw the opportunity to do the journalism class, I kind of started doing it. And I have had to make changes. At one point I had 41 kids in my 7th grade journalism class. And I was like, that's not going to work.
That's
We
a lot.
can't do that again, And so it became, I hate to say it's an elite program, so
Mhm.
kids have to apply and they know it's a high school credit option, which
Mhm.
makes it, elite to begin with.
For sure.
Um,
Yeah. There's nothing wrong
and
with that. That's good.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so, I'm taking the best of the best. These are kids that are being recommended by their language arts teachers.
Mhm.
I don't want a kid who can't spell in
Right.
journalism.
Yeah.
So, unless you can get a recommendation from your language arts teacher and you are a high achieving student, and, I've had people who apply, but their teacher wrote on their application, has trouble turning things in on time. And I'm like, nope.
Like that's 101, So,
Deadlines is kind of what we do here,
mhm.
So like if you can't turn your work in on time, you're not going to be successful here in journal.
Mhm.
So, making sure that I had an environment of 30 kids or less for journalism. So my room, the way it's structured is because I teach 3 grade levels, 6th, 7th, and 8th, and I
Mhm.
teach 3 different classes. So my 6th grade class is a creative arts class. My 7th grade class is journalism, and then my yearbook class is 8th. I have like 2 sides to my classroom.
Mm.
And starting in 6th grade, these kids see the yearbook side. Each
Right.
kid has their own desktop computer with their name on it, and they have these decorated things, and
Mhm.
there's fun puzzles to do. And so, starting in 6th grade, these kids are already like,
Yeah.
like they already have that excitement about wanting to do whatever it's going to take to get
Right.
them to that yearbook side of the classroom. So,
I want
I
my
think
own name tag on my computer.
yeah, that's exciting. It doesn't matter how old you are. I think as an
Yeah.
adult, we all want our name tags on our computers,
Mhm.
We all decorate our laptops with
Mhm.
stickers. Like that's what you never grow out of that
Right.
ever.
Of course. Yeah.
So, I think I just kind of tapped into it, but I have had to make adjustments. The large class size was a problem. It didn't work. At one point I had it structured so that for the journalism kids, I had it structured so that they stayed in one group the whole year. They just moved pages. So you'd have 4 kids, 5 kids in a group. And first month that we did the newspaper, they were in charge of headline news. The next month they did it, they were in charge of sports. And they just kind of rotated
Perfect.
through the whole newspaper. I don't know if you know this, but middle school kids are full of drama.
Oh yeah. Shocking. Brand new information.
Brand new information. So what I found is that wasn't always working, because when you have 4 or 5 kids that have to work together all the time,
Yeah.
there becomes
Conflict.
issues. You've got
Mhm.
one kid who's always doing the work and one kid who's never doing the work. And why should they get the grade that I did, And so that wasn't working. So I had to move away from that. I was working it at one point so that I had people who were in charge of it. So the same rotation, but instead of rotating through the newspaper, you were rotating through jobs. So maybe one month you were a photographer, one month you were an interviewer, one month you were design, one month you were writing articles,
Mhm.
and they rotated through jobs. That didn't really work either.
It also
And
depends on the group of kids too.
it
Like if your
honestly
group is
does.
changing, like the needs change.
Oh, for sure. So, I've kind of learned what works and what doesn't work, and based on the kids I have in the room, I can kind of figure out the best way to do it. So,
Right.
like the first 2 months of the year this year, my journalism kids decided that they wanted to pick their groups, they wanted to work with their friends. And after the first 2 months, I was like, "How's this going? Is it working? Is it working for you
Right.
to be
Right.
working with your friends all the time?" And they were like,
No.
"No." And I was
They're
like,
my
"Okay."
friend, but they don't work. Yeah.
And I warned them, but I was like, this group, they need to figure it out on their own. They're gonna have
Mhm.
to realize.
Mhm.
And so when their grades started dropping, they were like, "Yeah, we're not doing this. I don't want to work with my friends anymore."
Yeah.
So now we have it so that it's okay, we're doing the soccer spread. Who wants to do soccer?
Right.
And they're choosing the spread that they most want to work on, and or the sports page would include soccer, but same
Mhm.
idea, So that's kind of where the adjustments, especially at the middle school level with teenagers and hormones and drama and all of the fun that comes with being
Exactly.
11 to 14, you have to kind of be flexible, but at the end of the day, it always comes back to the relationships for me,
Hmm.
and the kids that want to be here because they feel at home in my classroom.
Right, right. I think that that's
And
key. That's like why we do it as teachers, but especially in
absolutely.
journalism where there's something on the line, like
Yeah,
there's a publication that people are going to see, it
right.
has to fall back on that relationship so they feel ownership of it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So I think that if somebody as a new advisor is trying to figure out how to make their program work, I know that I've read lots of things on like social media, on different, journalism or yearbook groups, that the problem is that their principals are just throwing kids in their class.
right.
Like your administration has to respect what you're doing. They have to
Yeah.
respect the integrity of the program.
Hmm.
So, I think we talk about relationships being the most important thing. That has to come from your relationship with your administration as well. So if
Right.
they don't respect you, if they don't respect what you're doing, and what I would say is invite them in, show them what you're doing, show them why having 80 kids in a yearbook class doesn't work.
Yep.
Show them why having a kid who can't pass language arts can't write an article. Like
Hmm.
it doesn't work. It cannot be a dumping ground. But until they come in and they see it, they're not
They
going to
don't
know.
get it. They just think
Yeah.
it's an elective. So
Yeah.
you can take anybody. Yeah. I think
So I
also,
don't know how, oh sorry, I don't know
no.
how they do it in other states, but in Florida we have a once a year evaluation as
Hmm.
teachers. So they do walkthroughs and they come in and they just kind of see what you're doing, but we have like one formal observation every year. And every single year I invite them into my journalism class or my yearbook class for my observation.
Yeah.
I don't want them observing my creative arts kids. I need them to see what's happening in journalism and yearbook so they realize how important it is, how intense it is,
Mhm.
how hard it is, that they're not just playing around on computers all day.
Right. That
You know?
organized chaos, like it's buzzing, but
Yeah.
things are happening. Yeah.
Right. And the number of comments and compliments that I get from administration when they come in, it's always like, this is a well-oiled machine.
Hmm.
Like your kids pretty much run themselves. And I'm like, yeah,
Yep.
because I've
And
trained them.
that's
I've
not by
trained them to
accident.
run
That's by
themselves.
design.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Because
what I was going to say also is these relationships we talk about and kind of harp on that the importance of it. One of the biggest questions post COVID that I see is
yeah,
my kids are not motivated. How can I get my kids to operate as this well-oiled machine? They just don't care. And I think
yeah,
it's because of that lack of relationship. We've become so automated and technologically savvy that
yeah.
it removes that personal relationship sometimes, even within the
Hmm.
classroom. And so I think taking a step back and taking time to go build those relationships, bond with your editors over the
Yeah,
summer, that will trickle down into the publication and they'll start to care because
right.
they feel, they're tied to it. So
Yeah.
I think that's
And
so
I try to do other things. So like we're in Florida, so obviously we have access to wonderful theme parks.
yes, the
So
best.
so not to promote Disney in any way, shape, or form, but Disney has something called the Imagination Campus, and
Hmm.
they offer workshops, and they're 3-hour workshops. And you can do teamwork workshops, you can do leadership workshops. They had at one point they had a photography workshop. They have
Cool.
immersive storytelling. They have theme park by design. So every year, I take my journalism and yearbook kids on this field trip.
That's cool.
And we go and they do this workshop and they see that the things that they're learning in journalism and yearbook actually apply to
Hmm.
other things in the world. So when we're doing immersive storytelling, if that's not theme, I don't know what that is.
Right.
So going into Galaxy's Edge at Hollywood Studios and seeing how even the trash cans represent the
Hmm.
theme. So when you're talking about putting a yearbook together, yeah, even the modules have to represent the theme. Even the headlines have to represent the theme because it's immersive storytelling. That's what we're doing here.
Hmm.
So I try to pick a workshop that reflects mostly what the kids need. And I try to do it like October, November, so that
Hmm.
then they can use it all year. And again,
Right.
they're doing it in both seventh grade and eighth grade.
Right.
And when you spend 21 hours with 50, 11 to 14-year-olds, you can't help but bond with
You
them, you
can't.
know?
You're gonna know
So,
everything about their whole life, their history, their family,
right,
everything.
right. I even like my mom works in education. So I bring my mom with me every year on this field trip as a chaperone.
You
you
need the
know,
help.
so
I'm sure.
well, yeah, but so it's another level of building that relationship because they're like, this isn't just my teacher, but it's also my teacher's mom. Like,
Right,
I
right.
really have to be respectful now, you know? So like I'm like, messing with me is one thing. Don't mess with my mom.
Don't
Can't
mess with
stand
my
that.
mom. Yeah, exactly.
You know, but I also wear Mickey ears and like they see me being a kid
Hmm.
and having fun. And like, what ride did you get on? What ride did you get on? And like we talk and then it's not just about being in yearbook. We've created this family. We've created like
Absolutely.
a relationship that they're not going to get in art class. They're not going to get in, well, band. I think does kind of have that environment, but
Yeah, there are other classes, but it's just not the same. You're not working towards
yeah,
a common goal. Like, I mean, marching band, yes, I guess you are. You're
yeah,
performing, but there's just not a class like journalism where you have that. And that's something I loved
yeah,
about at the workshop that I met you. There were theme days, and you and your kids just go crazy with the costumes,
yeah,
and
we do.
you are decked out head to toe as well. And that's
Yeah.
something that when I was teaching, I was so frustrated. They would have spirit days, and all these teachers are like snubbing it, like, oh, this isn't something
No,
that
you
they want to
have to
do. I'm like
participate.
at Party City dyeing my hair pink, like
Oh,
you got
for
to get
sure.
in it so that way the
Yeah,
kids think it's cool. Otherwise, they're not going to
right.
participate. So yeah,
You
I
have
love
to be
that you gave
willing to
in
be
it.
a nerd. You have to be willing to be a nerd. You have to be willing to be vulnerable. Like
Hmm.
I I think like I talk about my own children with
Hmm.
my kids. Like they know about my life, and I think there's kind of this mentality of as a teacher like you have to separate, they can't know about your personal life. But I like
You
have a
just power down
shrine.
at the end of the day and live in your classroom.
No, but like I have a shrine to my children behind me at all times,
Yeah.
like both of my kids go to this school and they're constantly stopping by and they know my kids, and so like
Mhm.
it's an also a unique relationship because they like can't it's not just like, oh, I didn't do my teacher's work. It's I didn't do my friend's mom's work.
Right, right,
You know,
right.
like, oh man, you're in trouble now,
Yeah.
so but like I just think something that has never failed me as a teacher since year 1 all the way up through year 15 has been that I am not afraid to be myself with my kids.
I
And
love
that
it.
includes like, guys, I have a migraine.
Yeah.
I need you to just leave me be today. Like
Hmm.
I cannot get out of my chair. I can barely keep my eyes open. I need you to just be chill. And they do because because I'm willing to tell them. And then when they come to me and they're like, Missy, I've just had such a bad day. Or I have a biology test next period and I know that I'm supposed to be doing yearbook right now, but can I please study? Yes.
Right.
Study.
Because
Like,
you're also teaching them those life skills. Take a mental
yeah,
health day, take a day for yourself. Don't
right.
don't work all the time. Like they're
Yeah.
observing you model that for them.
Yeah. So, it just never has failed me as a teacher. And I think it's just made teaching yearbook and journalism so much easier
Right.
to build those relationships when you can be that person to them. I always said as a middle school teacher that I wanted to be the person and the adult in their life that wasn't mom or dad
Hmm.
that they could talk to about anything
Hmm.
because I needed that when I was 13. I needed
Right.
that person.
Right.
And they do. They come and hang out in my room
For
in the morning
sure.
before school.
It's
They
home.
come during their lunch. Yeah. And that's what I wanted. I want this to be a classroom that they come to because it feels good, you
Absolutely.
know?
And I can
So
tell, I mean, just interacting with your kiddos for a couple of days at a workshop, you can tell that they do feel at home. They feel comfortable to speak up and share their ideas, share when they
yeah.
don't like someone else's ideas. And that's such a good thing. Sometimes there's a little drama or something like that, but that's such a good thing that they feel safe to be able to
Yeah.
express themselves. And it's so good. And your books show through that too. Like they
Thank
show,
you.
like at the end of the day, like we came together and made this happen. So I
Hmm.
think you've definitely built a great system. Okay, so I have one more question, and this
Okay.
time it just goes by so fast every time. We could keep
Yeah.
talking. So if we need a second episode, we can totally do that. But one of the biggest questions I get asked all the time, literally probably a couple times a week in my inbox, is how
Okay.
do I grade the work that they're doing? So I'd love to hear from
Yeah.
your perspective, specifically how you grade yearbook, but also like you said, the progression of sixth grade, seventh grade, and eighth grade, and how you communicate that. Also having it be a high school credit and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Starting in 6th grade, it's a creative arts class, and I say I'm like the Sam's Club or Costco samples of electives with
All the things.
all the things. So we have a portfolio that's divided by sections, and there's an art section, there's a STEM section, there's a interpersonal section, there's a creative writing section, a photography section, and I spend the entire year touching on 10 different things that are all elective options for them as 7th graders.
Mm-hmm.
So they get to try it all out in 6th grade, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, so they can decide
Right.
whether they want to buy it or not. Because
Right.
who
That's
really
cool.
knows if they want to buy it if they don't try it first?
Mm-hmm.
So I let them try 10 different things in 6th grade. And I find that the photography unit that we do is the most exciting for them every time, and probably because I'm most passionate about it.
Right.
But
That's true.
yeah, so that's when I start to see who's going to be taking journalism next year. I can kind of starts to pull out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So that I grade them as a portfolio. So they put their work in their portfolio, I go through it, and then they have this great binder at the end of the year that they can show for what they accomplished in 6th grade. So I'm already kind of planting the seeds of like having a publication,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, and then for 7th grade journalism and 8th grade yearbook, because it's a high school credit elective, they have to take a midterm and a final per district rules.
Mm-hmm.
So I do have to include things that they can be tested on a midterm or a final.
Right.
So I do have a textbook series that I use for journalism. And I found the one that was most appropriate for middle school because a lot of the journalism textbooks are very high school focused.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to really do some digging to find the best one that would be appropriate for 12, 13-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
And so they get assigned a chapter with, vocabulary, and they have questions that they have to do. And that's usually like they get a month to complete that. I also do like photo challenges with them. So I'm sure you've seen them on social media, like a December photo challenge, and it'll be 31 words, and it'll be like candy cane or glitter, and so they
Mm-hmm.
have to take a picture that represents those words to them and put it together in some sort of slideshow or Canva collage or,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So they have that practice taking, doing photography. And then for journalism, they get graded for the rough draft. They get graded on their final draft. I also show them CNN 10 every other week. And I do that mostly because they need to know what's going on in the world.
Right. Yeah.
They're young journalists. But also, I don't know if you've ever watched it. They talk really, really fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I explain to them, you're going to hate me. I know you don't want to do this.
Yeah.
But when you go out for an interview and somebody's talking really, really fast, you have to be able to pull out only what's important that they're saying and write that down. That one quote that's going to be in the article.
Yeah.
So you have to get used to people talking and saying a whole bunch of things really quickly at you and then pulling the one that's going to matter.
Right.
So we watch and they take notes, and then I give them a quiz, and it's like I give them 20 questions to choose from. They only have to answer 10, but they can use their notes to answer the question. So it just gets them in the practice of writing down the important information, listening to someone talk really quickly,
And the better notes
knowing
they take, the better they'll do on the quiz. So that
Absolutely.
encourages them to
Right.
actually pay attention and do it. Yeah.
Yep. And
Love
that helps them really in all of their other classes as well, because when their teacher is up there lecturing for 45 minutes, they really have to be able to write down the important things. So as much as they hate me for it, they know it's benefiting them.
Right.
Like,
It is useful.
really does.
So these are all things on top of their production of the newspaper, right? So you have like additional gradable tasks.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. And so like I even did recently, they had to do an assignment, and it was the 7th grade journalism class because they don't really do cutouts in the newspaper. But we sent in our first edition of the newspaper, we sent in to FSPA for an evaluation. And they suggested, because we have a cover on our front, we have like a front page, they suggested doing cutouts on our cover to make it look more like a magazine. And I was like, all right, well, now y'all are going to learn how to do cutouts.
Right, great.
So I, gave them a video that was actually made by my editor-in-chief 2 years ago from Yearbook.
Perfect.
Where they went on Canva and they did step-by-step how to do a cutout, and they had to do a cutout. They had to take a picture, they had to do a cutout on Canva, they had to submit it for a grade. So not something that's going to take them a long time, but applicable skills for what they'll be doing in yearbook eventually.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's kind
That's
of how I
great.
grade the journalism class. We're required to have 10 grades per quarter to give
Mhm.
them. So that's how I can kind of accumulate those 10 grades.
Right. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So then in yearbook, I really break down every deadline by mini deadlines. So they also get some extra assignment type
Mhm.
things, but they have like a layout deadline, they have a copy deadline, they have a photo deadline, they have how would I say layout, photo, copy, design elements, and then their final deadline. So that's 5 grades right there.
Right. Yeah.
And then they have those extra things, you know. So like we just did our business ad campaign, so they had I can't at the middle school level, I cannot require them to
Mhm.
sell an ad for a grade, but I
Right.
can require them to try.
Right. That's all we ask for.
So I give them a form. They have to get a signature from 5 different businesses that they've attempted to sell to. If
Mhm.
they sell one, great. If they don't, at least I have proof they tried.
Right.
So that's a grade that they get. You know,
Mhm.
so it's different things like that kind of throughout the quarter that I am able to give them grades for. And like I said, and then also the breakdown of the deadlines within a deadline
Mhm.
helps with time management. It helps me to kind of monitor
Right.
their work throughout instead of just getting it all at the end and going, oh, we have to redo this whole thing. You know,
Right.
I can kind of give them feedback a little bit along the way. And it's good for me too as a teacher because I'm really bad with procrastination. So, you know, it keeps them from procrastinating. It keeps me from procrastinating because I have to give them a grade, you know, so
Yeah.
I'm going in and checking their stuff as they go as well. So that's how I go about grading. I know that there's lots of different ways to do it, and it really depends on your school district or your individual school.
It does.
Um,
That's why I get asked it a lot, and I feel bad not having a really solid answer. But I
yeah,
just made a rubric a couple weeks ago where it was like standards based grading, and then I love hearing from individual advisors because the truth is that there is no best practice for how to grade publications. There's lots of philosophies in schools of thought. There's
yeah,
every school district has its own set of requirements, and so it's really hard, especially for
yeah,
a new advisor to think about. Even like my first year teaching, I gave everybody hundreds for everything. I was like, I don't have time to worry about this. Like,
yeah.
I just need the yearbook to be done. And so that's not fair either. So
Right.
that's
I have
definitely something that every advisor is like, give me information on. So
and I have gotten more harsh in my grading over the years because, like you, I was like, you completed something,
yay.
yay, you
Yeah.
know. So I was just giving out hundreds, and then I was like, no, wait a minute, this is a high school class.
Right.
Like my expectations have to be at a high school level, you
Right.
know,
And if
and
you had someone that isn't fulfilling the requirements, if you just give them 100 because they
right,
finally turned it in late, like
yeah,
you don't even have justification to get them, to not join the next year if you have multiple years. So
yeah.
yeah, they have to be quantifiable for sure.
And I have had kids in my 7th grade journalism class who have decided to drop the class before midterms because in our school district, if you drop a high school class before midterms, it's like it never happened. Poof,
Oh,
disappears.
okay.
So they realize they're not doing well. They realize they can't keep up with the requirements and the expectations, and they drop it for midterm. But I'm like, it's better you drop it now than me not
Right.
take you in yearbook because
Right.
that's embarrassing, you know? So
Yeah.
they have to realize and because it's already affecting their high school GPA, they don't want to get a C
Mm-mm.
because they're already starting high school in the hole.
Right.
Like they want the A, they want the B, you know? So I
Yeah. It's not
really
worth it to be that far ahead if that's how you're doing it for sure.
exactly. So I really feel like making these middle school classes high school credits has changed the trajectory of my
Hmm.
program completely. And that really just is in working with the high school advisors, you know, for
Hmm.
their media programs, working with the guidance counselor at your school who's in charge of high school credit classes, because even something like geometry is a high school credit class. So there's
Hmm.
someone at your school who's responsible for all those things. So
Right.
you
And
have
I
to
think
find
that
out who it is.
it also speaks to, like you said, relationships. Like you have to know who
Yeah.
those people are, have good relationships with them, be able to prove what your idea is and prove yourself
Mhm.
and show that this is going to be beneficial, because you have those relationships with those people.
Yeah.
So
I got
everything
lucky
in
that
life is about relationships.
it is. I got lucky because the guidance counselor that's in charge of the high school classes the year before I started, she ended up having to take over the yearbook class halfway through the year because
Oh,
the
that's
yearbook
perfect.
teacher
So she
moved.
knows exactly what it
So
is.
she knew what I was getting into, and she knew how hard the kids worked. So when I went to her and I was like, I want to make this a high school class, she was like, yeah, it should be. And I was like,
That's
okay.
great. What great support. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very
So
cool. Man, well, thank you so much for spending the time chatting with me. I
you're so
really appreciate
welcome.
it. I think you have such a good system and like you really built a machine. And so I know there's a lot of advisors out there that are either brand new or have been doing it for several years that can learn from how you've done things. So if you guys have questions, go ahead and drop them in the comments box below and I will reach out to Samantha and I'm sure she'll have more answers for you. Like I said, if we need a second episode because you have more questions, like we'll
Yeah.
do it. So ask the
I'm
question.
an open book, so willing to help
Awesome. I
anybody that
appreciate
needs it.
that. Good, good, good. All right, guys. We will see you in the next episode. Join us here next Monday for another episode of Just Advisor Things.